Good morning, James. How are you doing?
Morning, Dave. I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you. Yep. So thanks very much for today. I just wanted to do a very short video, really, just to talk about a recent market analysis that you've carried out. So do you want to give a little bit? Do you want to give a little bit of an overview on that? Just tell us what it was, James.
Yeah. So if we rewind back to March, June kind of time, we carried out a survey which effectively asked clients how they'd been affected by the coronavirus pandemic, and that was all about job prospects in accountancy and finance. That was really helpful and I think insightful, and people really appreciate you getting that information. So we're taking that a little bit of a step forward now, and we've produced some analysis based around the road to recovery and how business is recovering in the same area in Scotland. So yeah.
So obviously, coronavirus pandemic's all been a bit crazy, for the lack of a better word. How have you coped through it? You been okay with the kids at home?
Good. It's difficult to work. It's difficult when everyone's all in the same space. Yeah, it can be a bit noisy. My wife's a teacher, so you need to plan things out as to when everybody's doing everything. I mean, that's loads better now. The kids are all back to school, to be honest. So
I suspect that resonates with every single person that's watching this video, James. It's no different for anybody else, me included. Yeah, so, okay. Anyway, back to this. So the survey that you've carried out, Road to Recovery. Do you want to talk a little bit around how you've gathered the information?
Yeah, so we surveyed 387 clients. They were primarily in East Central Scotland. There were a few organisations that fell out with that, but the reality is that's the area we cover. So yeah, the clients were from quite a wide variety of industries. So industry and commerce, public sector, and charity primarily. And the people that were sent this information were typically finance directors, financial controllers, finance managers, or an equivalent kind of job title. I would say to you that, well, the information was asked for over the last 2 weeks, so it's up to date. Obviously, there's been a few restriction changes since then, but just to give some context to the findings.
Okay, so 387 responses, good cross section.
387 companies were effectively surveyed, so there'll be other people within that.
Okay, so a really good cross section of responses across different industries. What were your main findings from the report?
So I'd say there's been 5 findings. What I will do though is I will at the end of the video I'll let you know how you can get access to the full report. So if you want a little bit more insight and a little bit more detail, you're more than welcome to get that. But in terms of those 5 findings, I'd say the first was that on average, organisations think that it's going to be about 8 months before they're back to pre-COVID revenue or business levels, which is pretty interesting, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, around that, so 8 months until they're back to normal business levels. What would be your view on that?
Well, what I would say is I think each sector and each business has been dealt a bit of a different hand, so to speak. I think there's some clients that, if you rewind to the very start of all this, they maybe need to make a few minor tweaks and change what they were doing, obviously social distance and what have you. But the reality is it was business as usual for them immediately. There's others where most of their staff were furloughed and their revenue or turnover went down drastically. I think there's always that bit in between as well. I think if you compare it to similar situations, or I appreciate there's probably not very many similar situations, but if you go back to previous recessions, there's always winners and losers. Yeah, I think they're the main things I would say. I mean, I think I think with others there's been a far deeper impact, and I'd say that the main thing is though that people have taken it in their stride. I think people have slowly got used to the idea, and the fact is they just need to keep soldiering on, really, I suppose.
Okay. So there's not a similar situation. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think probably the closest thing Spanish flu in the 1920s or whenever.
I don't remember that one, which is probably
nor do I, funnily enough. But it is a completely unique set of circumstances. So interesting in terms of the findings from the report that I guess there's kind of different responses to that and how people are reacting to it. But what else have you found? So what would say your main kind of second finding from the report?
I think probably the second thing I'd say is that people, well, most organisations aren't using the furlough scheme anymore, and if they are, there's just a couple of people that are on that. I think it's pretty interesting, really, because the fact is it doesn't end until the end of October, and well, when we started and sent out the information of this survey, that was still a good 6 or 7 weeks before that was complete. I think my view is that, or at least I hope, that most organisations have acted pretty decisively, and if they need to streamline their staff or their operations, they've done it quite quickly, particularly from a finance point of view. I think it puts them in a far stronger position to grow their business and move it forward, having made those decisions early doors.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that across other parts of our business as well, James. Clients that have made decisions early on to streamline their business and understand, the real kind of need to do that during not just recession, but this absolutely unusual set of circumstances that's hit the market are the ones that are probably going to come out strongest beyond it. So it's quite interesting to hear that as well. And then, I mean, in terms of other findings within, what would you say, the third main finding?
I think following on from what I've just said about furlough, it's quite intriguing. I asked the question as to whether organisations felt that the furlough scheme should continue beyond October, and the vast majority of organisations said yes. But then on the other hand, the vast majority of organisations aren't using it. So I thought that was quite an interesting response. I guess that you could say, is there a bit of an anomaly in our data? But I don't think so. I think that people quite like the idea of the fact that there's a safety net moving forward if further restrictions get put in place. And I think as well that there's a bit of a sense of everyone's in this together. So just because one organisation doesn't need to use the furlough scheme anymore, they don't want to pull the carpet from underneath other organisations that have a little bit more of a reliance from it. So I thought that was quite interesting and quite positive to a certain extent.
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I really like the idea that there's companies out there that are saying, well, if we don't need to use the furlough scheme, we appreciate that, others that may need it more than us, let's not dip into that pot if we don't need it. It's right and appropriate that they don't, of course, but actually really quite encouraging to hear you say that.
And I think one of the things that we found as well is that most organisations are saying we're set up now to move our business forward. So I don't sense there's necessarily a huge amount of redundancies, at least from an accountancy and finance point of view. Everyone's in place. Most teams seem to be in place as to how they want them, so they can move their business forward. I think that's really encouraging, particularly across the whole of the Central Belt. Yeah,
it's really encouraging, absolutely. And then, thinking about the report a little bit more, then maybe something else. What was your next finding in the report?
I would say as well that most organisations are in a position to be able to recruit straight away if necessary. That doesn't mean to say they're all going to recruit. I think there's a difference between the two. Many stated that they'd be in a position to recruit again before the end of the year. I think about 40% of organisations said that. Admittedly, there were quite a number of organisations that they said that, look, we won't be in a position to recruit for a time, but that's not necessarily a bad thing if you've got your team in place obviously you're in a position to move your business forward. I think it's clear that confidence in the job market still needs to grow, and hopefully that will happen over time.
Yeah, but 40% is a good stat. I mean, if 4 in 10 clients are coming back and saying that they're in a position to move their business forward higher before the end of the year, that's absolutely encouraging to hear. So it's a really nice finding from the report. Yeah, absolutely. And then just picking one more finding then out of the report itself, tell me something else.
Well, there wasn't really a huge amount else to add. I mean, I think, I think definitely if you want that little bit more information, what I'm going to do is I'm going to post the report on the first comment on the link to this particular video. So please download a copy, take a look at it. If you've got any questions about it, please do get in touch. You've got our contact details.
Great. Okay, James. Well, look, thanks very much for putting it together. I've read the report. I think it's really insightful without a doubt. And I think it is a very positive report. Clients are talking about making the right decisions early on, how that's impacted their business, and what that looks like even this side of the year around them continuing or at least looking at hiring again, which is obviously really positive for, for us as an organisation, but for the UK as a whole. If clients are talking about hiring this side of the year, that can only be be good. I mean, it's been crazy times for everybody, and I think everybody's doing their best to sort of adapt and survive through it. So it's a great report.
100%.
All right, James, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
No, not a problem at all.
Cheers.